Yeah, I guess.
Are there any? Hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's late night happy hour. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky joined, we swear, by Ricky Cobb. You know him as the guy who runs the Super 70s sports account. And there he is. He's back.
There he is. He's a real person.
He's a real person. He's got his Gatorade. He's, you got to hydrate. And he's staying with us in Central Time. So it's late. Thanks, man, for coming on. We appreciate it.
Hey, man, what better way to start my Friday, right here with you guys.
It is. You are correct. It's actually just turned Friday, man. So that's awesome. We really appreciate it. We've both been following the account for a long time, but have never actually gotten in touch with you before or really even seen you before. You've always been this man of mystery behind the account.
Yeah, that was especially true for the first few years. I don't think for probably the first maybe 4 years, all that many people knew my name. And then there was a very nice feature on me in the Chicago Tribune in 2019. And slowly but surely, I started to crawl out from under the rock and, people figured out who I was. So that's kind of nice.
Did you have any reservations at all about actually doing something like that in terms of revealing your identity? It's almost like when Kiss took off the makeup. Remember when that was a really big deal? Finally
terrible idea.
Well, because paparazzis used to literally camp out and chase those four guys in Kiss, trying to get a photo with them without the makeup on.
Yeah, and then you saw what Gene Simmons looked like.
Yeah,
put it back on.
For real.
I've been wanting him to do that for about 35 years now. But yeah, I think mixed feelings. Honestly, there's that part of you that wants recognition, and people would say, "Oh, you guys are great. I love what you guys do," and I would take that as a compliment if people assume that it was more than one person writing material. But then there's the part of you that it's like, hey, I wouldn't mind having credit. I have a name. But then on the other hand, being just sort of an anonymous suburban dad, it is strange when people start to recognize you and start to look at you as being a known figure. So that's been a little bit of a trip, mostly good, but gaining some degree of notoriety in your late 40s is, it's a little different.
All right. So for people, I think most of the people who are with us on the show have probably seen the account and they've seen the thing. But if you've never seen Super 70 Sports, it looks kind of like this, just old pictures and stuff. You see this one with Dick Butkus and just a great line that goes with it. And he really is tackling everybody there.
Yeah, it's as Dick Butkus described the philosophy, when in doubt, just tackle every fucking buddy. And he is in this moment pretty much taken down everyone.
And so, it's the account kind of focuses mostly on sports and pop culture and all that stuff from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and some newer stuff. But I think the first place I want to start is what was your sports loyalty growing up? Because we're all about the same age, obviously. But when you were growing up, where were your sports loyalties? Who were your teams? Who were your players?
Well, first of all, I grew up in Kentucky, so we didn't have any major league teams in any of the big four. Kentucky, all these years later, Kentucky still doesn't. The Kentucky Colonels folded in 76 and that was it, really. And I think partly because there wasn't really just a baked in obvious favorite team for me in any sport. I was a little bit of a free agent. When I was very small, I was a typical front running little kid. I liked the Dallas Cowboys. That was my first favorite football team. And I think that's because, nice.
It's my wife's. I actually have learned to accept the Cowboys. I grew up despising them, but the things you do for love.
Well, the thing that's funny is I hated the Steelers because, they kept beating the Cowboys. And, now all these years later, the Steelers probably in retrospect are kind of my favorite team, the Steelers and the Raiders of that era. But, my first favorite baseball team was the Yankees. So that, this is almost like a confession. I'm just getting it off my chest. But Brian Doyle, I don't know if either of you guys remember Denny Doyle, who was the Red Sox second base for much of the 70s. And his brother Brian came up with the Yankees in the late 70s. And in 78, when the Yankees were chasing down the Red Sox, that huge comeback from 14 games down or whatever it was in July, or maybe even August, Brian Doyle was from my hometown and went to the same high school as me. And so I had this built-in rooting interest that some guy from Horse Cave, Kentucky, Cave City, Kentucky was on the New York.
You said Horse Cave, Kentucky?
Yeah, I said Horse Cave, Kentucky.
What is a Horse Cave, Kentucky?
Well, the legend when I was a kid was that, some guy was riding his horse and he fell into a cave. But I think that it's
quite a story, Ricky.
It's quite a story. and if you've been there, a little too believable, But small town America, population 2,000. I had 56 kids in my senior class, as I recall, when we graduated. And so I lived in a very small town. On my 21st birthday, I had only been to one major league park, and that was Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. It was a small world, My mom would take me to one Reds game a year. So I became a little bit of a Reds fan. I certainly had a little extra rooting interest in them, but the Cubs, when we got WGN in the early 80s, we got the good cable around 82, as I recall. And so, you get out of elementary school, go home. We would get out at 2:15, and then you go home, flip on WGN, and if the Cubs were at home, it was usually maybe third inning. And, I'd get myself some, I'm sure, very nutritious snack, and watch Harry Carey and Steve Stone. So when I wound up, moving to the Chicago area many years later, one of the things that I was most excited about is, thinking to myself, hey, I'm going to get to go out to Wrigley Field as much as I want to. And I certainly have availed myself of that opportunity, over the years that I've lived here.
Look, man, we grew up in St. Louis, and I don't hate the Cubs because the Cubs generally are so bad. It's not worth you don't hate the Cubs. They're terrible. But Wrigley is so cool.
Wrigley's amazing.
If you've never had a chance to go to Wrigley, it is so cool. It is so much fun to watch a game there. I do want to point.
I don't think it's what it once was. The video boards and the ricketization of it all. I hope everybody enjoys that World Series from 2016, because as the team gets gutted, by the Ricketts family, and you go out to Wrigley now, and it's loud. There's video boards everywhere.
Okay, that's interesting, because I haven't been in a long time. Like the last time I was in Wrigley, I want to say was maybe 2008 or 2009. It was when the Dodgers played them either in the first or second round of the playoffs. I was covering them for the LA Times. So I went to that series, and I haven't been since. Has it changed a lot, Wrigley, in like the last 12 or so years?
I feel like it's changed a lot. Probably more like, I can't remember what year they put the boards in, but it was probably 7-ish years ago, 7, 8, something like that. There's probably people out there now who are thinking I'm off, and I probably am. But, the thing that was so great, first time I ever went there was 2000, and it was still just the organ and the old scoreboard.
Right.
And the McDonald's across the street. Everybody from Chicago knows what I'm talking about. The Wrigley McDonald's, just a regular lousy McDonald's. No better than, it wasn't a special, Wrigley version. And now, of course, you know, I probably would have done the same thing, I guess, if I was a team owner. But, you know, they came in and they sort of ruthlessly tried to cash in on the nostalgia. And basically, I think on the inside, you know, in terms of what you're looking at, if you're in the ballpark watching a game, you know, they've created a lot of the sound and fury that you get at every other ballpark. And I think it lost a bit of its charm for me personally.
Yeah. First of all, I did want to point out just a bit of bullshit here. I am looking at the wiki page for Horse Cave, Kentucky. And in the list of notable people, it lists Simon Bolivar Buckner, the 30th governor of Kentucky, Clarence Glover, a former NBA player, Tom Moran, a former NFL player, John Stanley Palmore Jr., Chief Justice of Kentucky's Supreme Court, and that's it.
Yeah, that's some bullshit.
Ricky Cobb.
Yeah, the Wikipedia for Horse Cave is obviously not keeping up with my meteoric rise to stardom. So I'm a little disappointed. Now I know Clarence Glover's son. I went to high school with him. But good guy, Adonis Glover. Shout out Adonis wherever you are. But yeah, look, I'm like the Rodney Dangerfield of social media. I get no respect. I don't even have a blue check mark on Twitter. You know?
Have you really? You have 400,000 Twitter followers and you don't have a check mark?
When I got hacked last summer, there was a note about it in the New York Post sports section, but I'm still not notable, I guess. It's one of those things where Twitter's been very good to me, and I don't want to be petty, but I'd like my goddamn.
Well, okay, you know what? We are going to be petty on your behalf, Ricky. I'm tweeting out right now as we send out continual show links over the course of this hour. I am tweeting right now to verify it. How about getting Super 70 Sports a damn blue check? Come on, man! Like seriously,
it would be nice. You know, I love Twitter. Twitter, like I say, Twitter's been very, very good to me, you know, as the man once said. But
yeah, I'm going to say right now, I'm saying we are verified and we are vouching for him. Like we are going to put our name as somebody who's been blue checked, you know, a good 4 or so years, maybe even longer. We are going to put our name and our blue check and our power behind you, man, because this honestly. This is an outrage that should not stand. Like this pisses me off.
I'll tell you the cruelest cut of all. You know, I think I'm 412,000, something like that now. I saw a guy once, a meteorologist, and I think it was Idaho, but it might have been one of the Dakotas. 90 followers, blue check. And I made a comment about it, and he responded and said, "Sucks to be you." You know, so
well, I mean,
so I always get a kick out of it when somebody follows me and they've got 800 followers or 1,500 followers in the blue check. I just kind of shake my head, But I figure, one day when it happens, it'll be my personal triumph.
Well, actually somebody else watching the show right now. Sachin Deshpande just said, start a hashtag campaign for the blue check. So I think we are going to start the beginning of your eventual blue check, Ricky. Like this is going to become a thing for us. This is going to be our mission for you because again, this is outrageous.
It really is. It's just, it really reinforces how none of this makes any sense. So like one of the things that I think is fascinating as we sort of get into what you do is like, again, it's just for people who haven't seen it, it's stuff like this. Today in 1979, Phil Jackson recorded a historic triple-double when he scored 15 points, grabbed 11 rebounds, and tucked his balls back into his shorts 27 times. And you can see, there's not a lot there that's left to the imagination in this old school photo of Phil Jackson playing with the Nets. First of all, how did this happen? Like, how did you end up doing this? And then I want to kind of get into just like the role, like the role of nostalgia and just looking back on all this stuff. But let's start with the first part. How did this happen? How did you become the guy who writes jokes about Phil Jackson tucking his balls back into his shorts 27 times?
Imagine that guy went on to be like the coolest dude in every room he was in, Mr. Nutsack there. I was on, I think, Christmas break from my day job. As you guys know, I'm a college professor. When I'm not making it swing on Twitter, and I was, I think, on the little 4 or 5 week break.
So was Phil.
Yeah, I was going to say.
That's right.
Phil was a player on the Nets and the Knicks when he wasn't making it swing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was really making it swing. And so I think that it was probably just a spontaneous thing. I thought, well, maybe this would be fun. I don't know if you guys know who Dan Epstein is, but
No.
He wrote a book probably about 10 years ago called Big Hair and Plastic Grass. And it was about baseball in the 1970s. And I thought it was a great book. I'd recommend it to anybody if you like my Twitter feed, you should get Dan's book. And I was a fan of it. And Dan had created a Facebook page to kind of promote his book. And every day he was posting these little nuggets about, Dave Rossello's afro or Bill Madlock, or, he would wish these guys a birthday and post a baseball card and have a little something to say. And it just sort of registered with me after a while that I was really looking forward to it. And I couldn't quite figure out why, but like every day I would go check and see what Dan Epstein had posted about 70s baseball players that day. And I think it occurred to me, well, I'm having so much fun reading what he's posting about baseball players. What if I kind of did my own spin on it and just did all sports rather than just baseball? And so I created the Twitter account. I actually created two. A lot of people don't know this. I created Super 70s Sports, and I created something that I called Awesome 80s Sports. And, after doing it for about 3 or 4 days, I just decided the hell with this. It's too much trouble having two accounts. And so I, just went all in with Super 70s Sports. And all in at that time really just meant that I was tweeting, probably 2 or 3 things 3 or 4 times a week. It was like a tree falling in the forest. I had maybe 500 followers after having done it for a few months. And in 2015, something hit a tipping point. People started to notice it. And I went from 2,000 to 3,000 to 5 to 10 to 20 by the end of the year. And Sports Illustrated named me to some silly, Twitter social media list at the end of the year. And when that happened, I realized that, well, it seems like this is something. I don't quite know what it is, but it's more than what I initially thought it would be, which was really probably just something for me and a handful of friends to, have a laugh about.
Okay, so like one of the things that makes this site so funny is like, again, especially if you grew up collecting baseball cards, you grew up in the era or whatever, like this isn't you, like this isn't your stuff, but this is the kind of thing that you put on the site. I'll share my screen here. And let me see if I can, here we go. Like you get more mileage on Super 70 Sports out of baseball players wearing glasses than like anybody I've ever seen. Like, so let me see here. So here's like one page. If you just Google 1980s baseball cards and glasses, like this is some of the shit that pops up. Like, look at what these people are wearing. Let's see if I can find another one. Like here we go. Like, so what is so fertile about stuff like that? Like it's not just like 70s and 80s baseball players, but 70s and 80s baseball players wearing glasses. Like it's stuff like that you mine so much out of.
There was a card there that I saw briefly. It was the 1979 Topps Mark Lee, and he's wearing a great pair of glasses. If you Google that and look it up, it became one of my better known tweets. I tweeted that, people made fun of Mark Lee's glasses, but no pitcher is ever the same after having Elton John surgery.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
the interesting thing about that one is, as you guys know, I have the Super 70s Sports store where we have T-shirts and all kinds of sports and pop culture references from the 70s and 80s and forward. But an order came in. Somebody bought a couple of the Elton John surgery shirts, and it was Mark Lee. And so I actually sent him an email, and I was like, "Are you, are you Mark Lee? Mark Lee?" And he's like, "Yeah, I am. I saw somebody told me about this, and I love the shirts." And so I issued him a refund and said, "How many do you want?" He said, "I'd like to have about a half a dozen for myself and family members." And so I shipped him out a half a dozen, and he actually sent me a picture of him wearing the shirt, which was a pretty cool thing. And
does he still have the glasses?
And actually, Mark being so cool about that, is really indicative of the way that athletes have been about Super 70s. People ask me sometimes, has somebody ever lit you up for something that you said about them in a tweet? And the truth is, nobody has ever, an athlete has never complained or said, "Why you son of a bitch, why did you do that?" And quite the opposite, actually.
I mean, look, first of all, what are they going to say to you? Like, you didn't put those glasses or those sideburns or that hair or the lapels or whatever the hell that you're pointing out that they're wearing, their choices, those were theirs, not yours. But I also think too, like, it is funny to look back on that stuff. I mean, like, I think most people have a pretty good sense of humor about the idea of what I was wearing 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Like, generally, it doesn't age well. Like, Brian was asking before, like, about why these guys would be wearing, all these athletes wearing big glasses.
But this is Mike Davis, an outfielder for the A's. Like, if Mike Davis hit 200 wearing those fucking glasses, like, it's a goddamn miracle. Look at those things. Like, those are what you wear on the street. Like,
but here's the thing, though. It was the 70s.
I know.
Everything was big.
Yes.
Like, the idea of wearing contacts, which makes a hell of a lot more sense as a professional athlete. They didn't have, it was more hard contacts back then.
Former Cardinal.
But still, yeah, he was. But, guys just did this. Like,
that's a look.
Everything was big. They drove in a massive Cadillac, I'm sure, or some type of gas guzzler. And they had their big shirt with the big collar on when they arrived, and they put on their big glasses to play baseball.
Yeah, I mean, Reggie Jackson, who was my favorite player as a kid, at least once per at bat, he would do that thing, where you got to push it back up on your, your nose. And, it was so common. And, that's the thing, people ask me what is it about the 70s? Why the 70s? And I think as good an answer as any is, because just look at these guys, that's why it's the answer is kind of self-evident. Look at the cars, look at the clothes, as you were referencing, look at the hairstyles, look at the glasses, look at the shag carpeting, look at all of that. And, tell me another decade that is, quite that garish and excessive,
Yeah, I mean, the 70s are a really interesting period, like, in terms of pop culture, because, like, I don't know if there's ever been a better decade that simultaneously produced great music, TV, and movies all at the same time. Like, there have been different decades that have had, maybe 2 out of the 3, but like 3 out of the 3 is pretty amazing. And then you combine, like, very, very specific styles with fashion, overall sensibilities, cars, like you were talking about, but there's also Watergate happened in the 70s. You've got, like, gas wars going on. You had, like, that garbage strike in New York. Like, there was a lot happening in that decade. Like, the specificity of the 70s, I think, is one that, I mean, like, the 60s has it in certain ways as well, but I would imagine that, like, specificity.
Yeah, but I feel Andy too, like, the 70s and 80s, the 80s especially, I think, like, it's that bridge era between where, like, stuff is recognizable. Like, they had computers in the 80s, like, they had, like, but it's still so wildly different than it is now. like what was available, how you listen to music and stuff. So it's like it's both recognizable and completely different, but not in like a 40s and 50s way where it's like yeah, completely another planet. I think there's something interesting about that bridge era.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, you look at the 60s and look at the 80s, and we got there somehow. And the answer is we got there through the 70s, and a lot of changes took place during that time. But it was just such a different time. I did a tweet earlier today about an old rotary dial phone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even just the rotary dial phone. And yes, we're cranking that thing to make a phone call like some cave person. But at the same time, I remember growing up, we had a party line. You'd go to make a call and you pick it up, and your fucking neighbors talk.
It's pretty crazy.
You could listen in, but you'd have to wait. And so, so many.
What were your neighbors talking about in Horse Cave at that time?
Yeah, they, we're probably talking about cows and tobacco and, all that good Horse Cave stuff. But yeah, it's hard.
I certainly want to listen in on that.
It's hard for my kids, to realize. I'm not 50 yet. I turned 50 this year, but to think how much things have changed, in terms of just technology, if nothing else, is, it's pretty remarkable. We thought we had it good, and I guess we did, but we didn't know what we were missing either.
You know what's funny though, like because you brought up that rotary phone, and this is something that Brian and I have both noticed with our kids when they were younger. Kids intuitively understand that that's a phone, even though like the phones that they see their parents use, or frankly anybody use in the 2010s, now the 2020s, like they don't even come close to resembling anything like that. Like I don't even know if my daughter, other than like in an office or in a store, has ever even seen a landline, or like maybe in her school. Like I don't even think she's ever been around one, that it wasn't in some type of professional setting. But when she was like 2 or 3, she'd be in preschool, and they still had the old toys from like my age, and she understood that it was a phone. Like it's really weird.
I'll say this, like we have a 2-year-old at home, and she has these little little baby kid dominoes. She doesn't understand like how to do the dots and this and that, but you know what she does use it as? A phone, because it's the same shape as mommy and daddy's phone. So she goes, hello, hello. So that's what she does with dominoes. So they may intuitively understand it, but they also think anything that's a rectangle is a phone.
Yeah, I saw you guys may have seen this too, but there was a little short video going around a few years ago of probably like a 2-year-old kid who had a magazine and was taking her finger, and trying to scroll on the magazine.
Wow, and that's funny.
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
Oh God, I remember my daughter when she was like 5. She asked me what I used to watch on Netflix when I was a kid, and when I explained to her that Netflix didn't exist, like the internet didn't exist when I was her age, like you had 3 channels essentially, maybe 4. She just gave me this look of pity. Like it wasn't even like she couldn't wrap her head around it. She's like, "Oh my God, you poor bastard! Like, what did you used to do with like just 4 channels? Like, how did you live?"
Well, what you did, but this is what I think is different about sports now too. Is what you did was you went home and eventually you had more channels. And you watched WGN or you watched TBS and like whatever Braves game was on. Like I didn't like the Braves. I hated Harry Carey, but I still watched because that's the baseball game that I could see. I didn't have I couldn't just look up clips. I couldn't do all this other stuff. And it's the way people consume sports now has really changed all of this stuff. I mean, it's kind of, to me, it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we've lost, is we've lost the common experience a little bit, I think. You know, when I had Nick Bakay on my podcast a couple of times, and the last time that Nick was on, I don't know how, but our conversation came around to Laverne and Shirley, and we were both talking about Laverne and Shirley, and I can't remember which of us said it, but it was like, it really wasn't that good. I mean, I'm not, it was okay, but we were watching it mostly because it was the best. We decided it was the best of the three options we had.
Right. Right.
And so, you were in front of the TV watching it, or you missed it. And so the next day, there were no, there wasn't like, don't spoil Laverne and Shirley for me. I'm going to watch it later. The writers spoiled it, right? But I don't know why I'm bagging on Laverne and Shirley.
There's a lot of Laverne and Shirley slander here.
Good show. I mean, it had a lot of talented people on it, but I could pick.
I mentioned Michael McKean as our guest tomorrow, Rick.
Right.
Oh, he's the best.
Yes, he is.
He's genuinely one of my favorites.
He is the best. David St. Hubbins, much respect. Everything that guy is in immediately becomes twice as good for his role in it. But Laverne and Shirley and shows like that, we could go to school the next day and talk about them, and we did. Whereas today, lots of times, what somebody's favorite show is, I may have never heard of it. I may have never heard of the streaming platform that it's on, much less heard of it. And it's great to have options, don't get me wrong, but everything is so splintered and fractured now that I wonder if, when this generation looks back on, what they were doing, they're going to be able to relate to one another quite in the same way that guys like the three of us can.
Right.
Well, now, here is a show that I think we can all agree was just phenomenal. Everyone knows that, as you said, things picking up down at the Regal Beagle. You got your Jack Tripper. You got Lonnie Anderson. It looks like making a special appearance as they watch Chrissy dance. That show is still just unbelievably funny. It's just the best.
It's gold, and it's interesting to see sometimes which shows hold up and which ones don't. But Three's Company, I think, really holds up. I mean, John Ritter was so good, and Richard Klein was so good, and
Larry
Norman Fell was so good. There were a lot of comedic genius.
Well, I mean, honestly, the only thing that does, the comedy holds up. The only thing that really doesn't hold up is the premise that, like, a landlord would be, particularly in Southern California, would be that hung up on the idea of a single man living with two women that wasn't gay. Like, yeah. So I mean, like, that's the only part that the comedy itself actually still works.
It does. Yeah. No, I thought that Santa Monica was enlightened.
Apparently not.
The late 70s. I don't know.
This is one of the, this one is, I think, one of the great things about the site, and I'd love you to get into a little bit, because it actually kind of gets into what you do with your day job. It talks about gator gum. And if you again, are of a certain age, you remember going into your local sporting goods store and getting as much of this shit as you possibly could, because it made you fast and awesome in gum form. And the flavor lasted for about 12 seconds, and then you were done with it. And it was terrible gum, but it was like a part of your baseball growing up. You teach sociology. That's like your day job. What is it about sort of the nostalgia of just looking at gator gum that makes me go, God, I love this website, or man, I want to share this, or what it is? Like, what is it about the nostalgia play that you're doing here?
Well, the connections that you make are strange and wonderful sometimes. I'll tell you, the biggest gator gum fan, other than myself, that I've ever met is Dale Earnhardt Jr. And Dale and I had like a 20-minute text conversation one night that was 90% about gator gum, I think, and I'm thinking to myself, well, geez, I guess everybody gets it, regardless of where you grew up. It cuts across, geography. It cuts across socioeconomic lines. It cuts across, race and, various other factors, that if you were there and you lived through it, there's just certain things that you remember that when it comes up or when you see it, it triggers those memories, almost like music does, right? You know how songs will just take you back to a time and place. I think that I've learned, and believe me, I don't think I knew the power of this when I started, but I began to understand the power of it as, the time went on, of, throwing a tweet up like that Gator Gum tweet. It's almost like hearing a song that takes you back to a specific time and place. And, the time and place may be a little bit different for each of us that, sees the tweet, but it's tapping into something that we share, and just creates this instantly relatable thing where, I've said before that I think every day on my feed is, just sort of like an informal high school reunion of a bunch of kids that may not have gone to the same high school, but we can relate to one another as if we did.
Well, I mean, if you are of a certain age, you obviously will be taken aback by this image of Tab Cola. And as you said, perhaps no beverage has ever succinctly stated "mom's on a diet." We see here the Tab is in an hour-shaped glass. What's hilarious about that, because like I had forgotten, but then I recalled when I saw the photo. Do you remember one of their slogans was "Tab for beautiful people"?
Right. Tab Cola, what a beautiful drink. Tab Cola for beautiful people.
Like, that is not a slogan that you would have now for a soda. Like, the idea of this is what the beautiful people drink. Like we're going to go for something this superficial in our advertisement for a drink. Basically, you uglies over there, you people who aren't taking care of yourself, you go drink your sugar soda. But we're essentially going to fat shame the rest of you all into either drinking Tab or continuing to drink Tab. Like, it's funny to look back on that.
Yeah, you can orange crush yourself into obesity, or you can join the jet set on the red carpet with our Tabs. Commercial.
That was absolutely disgusting, by the way. I mean, because I mean, Mom had it in the house. It is true, and it was absolutely marketed to and for suburban women.
It was considered.
So it was in the house.
It was considered glamorous. Like, Tab was considered like a sophisticated. In addition to a shallow drink, it was also a very sophisticated cola.
And was it Tab that had 1 calorie?
Yes.
So they're like,
Ricky, are you not reading your own tweets?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, that's right. Getting a little lazy here in year 6 of Super 70. But yeah, it had 1 calorie. So it had that little bit of intrigue. Like, what the fuck's in it that it has 1 calorie? They couldn't have gotten that last calorie out. So to me, that added to the mystery of Tab. But
it also came with a warning label.
So crazy, I mean,
you remember the warning label, Ricky?
The warning label was probably that it causes cancer in laboratory animals, or
correct,
like that, as I recall.
Because it had saccharin.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Hey, look, you got to be willing to take a few chances for, being an amazing human being. So,
I mean, what's the point of being healthy if you don't look fantastic? I mean, like, why are you bothering to keep your body free of additives and stuff if there isn't like a physical payoff to it? Like, if you're not going to be, bringing in the dudes and, making your girlfriends jealous by the way you look. I mean, really, what's the point of it all?
I don't think there is one.
Exactly. I mean, the whole thing's a waste of everybody's time. I need to know how you landed on this picture. Because that really is the worst. Like that's bad by prison standards. Like that's
got to be a setup, right? It's for people listening to the podcast, it's a urinal and then another urinal appropriately spaced with a regular toilet in between, with 2 toilets on the side of the regular toilet.
Yeah, I mean, every time I see that photo, I just try to visualize what that room would look like if all 5 of those things were occupied. I mean, you've got some guy's ass in your face, some guy's got his dick out next to your head, your ass guy next to you for toilet paper, guess what? Take a look at that again. There is no toilet paper.
No.
So not only are you getting real up close and personal with your buddies, we could at least have a roll of toilet paper.
I mean,
you don't even get that.
That urinal on the right, you barely have room to stand. And then, like, what are you doing with your legs if you're sitting on the 3 toilets there?
You're out of luck if you have a shy bladder. You might as well just keep moving. If you got a shy bladder at all, it's not going to be happening for you in that room.
I mean, you're going to – I mean, somebody may have – I think – well, I was going to say you might have to go side saddle. But the problem is if there's 2 people at the urinals, then you're all up in their business too. I mean, this is really tricky to negotiate. Like,
there's no good way to do it.
I feel sorry for the guy on the middle toilet. You know, is that the worst? You got 5 options there. Is that the one that is going to be taken last if 5 people walk in? Which one would you find unoccupied if 4 guys were in there and you came in? What do you think? I got to say the middle toilet probably.
That would be the worst. But also, too, my question is, if you walk in there and somebody's actually using one of the toilets to take a shit, do you sidle up to the urinal next to them and just be like, hey, man, and go? Or do you wait until he's done? What's the etiquette here? I have no idea.
I have no idea either. And then, like, what's that part? Look at the partition. You've got like 5, you got like 2 guys taking a leak, 3 guys taking a dump, and then they have a partition for like everybody else.
For modesty.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not animals, Rick.
Is there a payphone there?
This to me feels like one of those things, and you see it like this went viral the other day. I saw this, and this is something that happens now, and I think is really funny because it gets everybody completely up in arms, and they don't understand. There was this woman, rich white lady who's making nacho cones on her countertop or whatever, and it's clearly designed just to go viral so people get really upset and be like, what the hell is this woman doing? So she takes a big tub of nacho cheese, doesn't even heat it, just opens the can and spreads it out onto this marble counter island, and then opens cans and just proceeds to lay everything out, and then chops up chips into it, and then does all this stuff. And each step is more revolting and disgusting and totally ridiculous than the last. And then she puts it in the cone and you eat it. And then she's like, look, nacho cones. And it does exactly like that picture. And it makes everybody upset. Like, that's got to be staged specifically for this purpose, right? So people will then have this conversation. That can't be a real bathroom. Right?
It's either that or it's Russia.
You want bathroom experience? I mean, you're right. I mean, it's like, look, you want to hold or you want to go? Like, if that is,
that's my theory.
Yeah,
the odds are probably longer on Russia, but I'm going to put my money on that anyway.
Interesting comment from Granted LA. The worst trough is at Wrigley. It's in a circle. You look up and you're staring another dude in the face. Have you used that one as a frequent Wrigley traveler?
Well, I've used the troughs, more times than I can count. I don't know that I've ever had.
I've never seen the circular one though.
Yeah, I don't remember gazing, into anyone's eyes over a trough, but I don't know. I might see, I get enough drinks in me. I might seek it out and just try to make somebody uncomfortable.
That just seems like it literally, like quite almost literally seems like an accident waiting to happen. What is the like when you do you see a difference? Like, this is another one that I thought was really fun because it reminded me of this commercial. Like, this was a really, really popular commercial in the 70s and 80s for Parquet margarine, and it was just this talking margarine tub, and it was everybody knew exactly what it was. Do you get a different response when you post stuff like that versus pictures of Muhammad Ali or random baseball players wearing weird glasses?
Yes and no. I mean, the Parquet thing, I think that tweet was a little underrated, if I'm being honest. I'm glad that you appreciated it, because the Parquet, it wasn't, it was just an asshole. it would be like butter, and you're just like, bullshit, you're not butter, butter. It's like, shut the fuck up. I know what you are, butter. And then finally, the person's like, butter, and then it's just like parquet, so what a dick. The reaction that you get, certainly I've gotten pretty good at predicting. My batting average on the predictions is not 1,000. Occasionally I'll be surprised that something doesn't resonate that I thought was gonna. Other times I'll throw something out there that I'm kind of lukewarm on, and then it just really takes off. And then there are times where, it's kind of a slam dunk. Like if I'm looking at my timeline and like the last 2 or 3 tweets have kind of gotten a meh response, and I know that it's time to, have an extra base hit, I kind of know what those areas are because I've come to know my audience. But then there are the tweets that you just do for yourself. If you're going to tweet 25 times a day, which is probably my average, you gotta make sure that, some of them are just for you. And so sometimes I'll take chances and have a little fun with it and kind of take the temperature of my audience, and then think to myself, oh, okay, they like that, huh? I'll remember that.
How often?
I remember that.
Oh, go ahead, Andy.
How often with something like parquet, for example, or the tab that we were talking about, that's very, very specific to a particular era that you either lived through or not, and among the 400 or so thousand followers you have, which again explains why you should be verified. Get on it, Twitter.
Unbelievable. Could somebody update the Horse Cave Wikipedia page, please?
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe
don't make me do it myself.
Maybe that's what it is. Like Twitter did a little bit of background and you're like, my God, he's not even famous from Horse Cave. Like he doesn't even qualify as a famous person from Horse Cave. Why are we verifying this guy?
Unbelievable.
But with something like parquet or tab, I mean, you've got followers that clearly are, generation or two younger than you and did not live through this and may not have actual reference points to this. How often do you find them asking you like the backstory on it or expressing that kind of curiosity?
You'll get that sometimes in the comments, and I think that's a huge part of what makes Super 70s what it is are the comments, because oftentimes somebody will say something in the comments that I think is more amusing than whatever my caption was, and the conversations that get started and the running jokes that get started. Sometimes it's like sort of in some ways, maybe my favorite thing about Super 70s is the fact that my caption is, it's not the end, it's really the beginning of the conversation. And sometimes those conversations just ebb and flow and go into all kinds of hilarious places, and sometimes informational places too that, you couldn't really predict. But I will say this, I've got the best followers anywhere. I mean, if you're talking about people that are, funny, witty, clever, generally informed, educated folks, I'll put my followers up against just about anybody's. Every day I'm delighted by something that one of my followers says, and oftentimes not, many times a day, quite frankly.
No, you create a lot of really funny threads. I mean,
for sure.
That's part of the appeal.
I think, like stuff like this also too is like, this is so specific to a certain kind of like time in like the NFL, just the helmet phone, like the draft helmet. I don't know if this is what, the phone might actually be, but like the helmet phone was like a thing, and like it was a big deal, and this is how you made your number 1 draft pick, and this is the kind of phone that you wanted in your house, and you could you can make an Earl Campbell joke in here. Like this stuff has become culturally iconic to the point where I think you could be 15, 16 and still understand what the helmet phone was. So there are certain things I feel like that do bridge, that are kind of cool in that way. So I mean, do you find that you have a lot of 27-year-olds who come on this stuff and still get what you're talking about and get what you're doing?
Yeah, I do. I think that people sometimes overestimate, the idea that my audience is just, guys between 40 and 60 or whatever. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of younger followers. And I think as time goes on, my feed has become more eclectic than it used to be. And I think that, yes, if you're 25 years old, there's going to be more references that you aren't going to get. Like, you might not have gotten that, Jim Rockford and Angel reference. But, if you're willing to sift through the tweets,
to be honest, I didn't totally get that one.
that you're going to miss a few. I think that I'm serving up, multiple tweets a day that could be enjoyed by people of any age. Like Danny White making out with the cheerleader, who I'm told he eventually married.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it's a lot more.
That keeps it from becoming something you spend too long wondering. Okay, like is this really okay?
It speaks for itself. Some of these old ones, you don't need to know anything more than there's a guy kissing a cheerleader on the sideline.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're going to have a reaction to that, whether you're at you're our age or you're our, my kid's age. So, I'd like to think that the captions for a lot of these are appealing across, age demos, regardless of whether they remember who the person is. Hopefully, with most of them, I'm able to get something in there that allows people to enjoy it on their own level.
And
that is glorious.
And you do come across some really random shit, like the volume 13, issue number 6 of Putt Putt World. Like, just the fact that stuff like this exists is just strange.
How were there 13 volumes of Putt Putt World?
That was my first reaction. Like, somewhere like the late 60s and 70s were huge for the print putt putt industry. It's just, there's so much random stuff that's out there that was popular that doesn't make much sense.
By the way, fellas, I'm told that magazine was considered the Bible of putt putt. Like the Sporting News used to be for baseball.
Wow. So were there cut rate putt putt magazines that were aspiring? Like, they're thinking like one day maybe if we get some exclusive, we can be just as big as Putt Putt World.
Yeah, there were fringe publications, probably self-published, but there was no room. Putt Putt World had a stranglehold on that market.
Now, what are some of like the 70s, 80s TV shows or movies that you find yourself returning to the most, that you just get the most enjoyment, your go-tos, that sort of stuff?
Well, TV shows, growing up, my favorite show was The Brady Bunch. I'd come in from school, like I was talking about, maybe you watch the Cubs, then you flip it over to TBS and you watch a couple of episodes of The Brady Bunch. So I grew up on The Brady Bunch, but I'm a big fan of the cop and, PI shows of that era. So Columbo, Rockford Files, those are probably my two favorite shows of the 70s. I even like McMillan and Wife. It's cheesy, but so much.
I'm sure I remember that one.
I don't know that one. Yeah, what's another one?
Rock Hudson and Susan St. James.
Oh, wow.
He's a police commissioner who gets involved in every goddamn case and brings.
Of course he does.
So, it's amazing. But sure, Three's Company is another one. What's Happening?
Yeah.
What's Happening?
When I was a kid, Sanford and Son.
When I was in high school, I was with a friend of mine. We were going on like a school trip or something. Or no, it was like a spring break thing with some friends of ours. And I saw Fred Berry, who played Rerun, in the airport. And like, this lets you know how long ago this was, because you could actually do this. He was being driven on one of those carts, because he's a big deal. He's Fred fucking Berry. My friend and I literally dropped our bags where we were, and we started chasing after this cart because we wanted to meet Fred Berry. And we eventually chased him down, caught him. He was super nice. And we asked him to give us autographs, and he did. And he signed it Rerun. He didn't even sign it Fred Berry. I was like, oh my God, you don't have to do that. Like, we know your name. Like, I was like, that's beneath you. You don't have to sign this thing Rerun.
I know, it was really sad.
How old were you?
I was probably 16 or 17, something like that.
Okay. You were old enough to understand. I thought maybe that was cute if you were 9.
No, no.
Like, oh,
I actually, I was kind of horrified for him that he did this. Like, I was like, man, you're Fred Berry. Like, if somebody gets your autograph and doesn't know you're Fred Berry, that's on them. That's not on you.
So you're telling me that I should stop signing my autographs, Super 70 Sports? I can go Ricky Cobb now? Is that what it is?
Well, it depends on whether you get this blue check mark or not.
Yeah, I had Barry Williams on my podcast a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
And we were, very nice guy. And, let's face it, I don't get starstruck that much anymore. And, you guys probably same thing. Once you're around famous people a bit, you kind of get adjusted to it. But there's always, certain people that doesn't apply to, right? And so for me, Barry Williams was, he's great.
For people that know, that's Greg Brady from the Brady Bunch.
And I was asking him about, how, what's it been like through your life? And he said, I have a lot of friends. And I said, do people approach you and they think you're Greg Brady? And he said, oh yeah, it happens frequently. And I said, what do you do? And he said, I just nod my head and thank them. And they'll ask about Marcia or Peter, and he'll just say they're fine. And you have people out there in the world, even now, but who think of him as Greg Brady to the point that, they can't separate that. So I don't know. That's a little weird from Fred, though.
But don't make me talk about that bastard cousin Oliver.
It probably doesn't help that he looks exactly the same. Like certain people, like, oh my God, that they really don't look like they did when they were teenagers on TV. Barry Williams looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
So you can't, there's no mistaking who he is.
It's, I'm sure that's been a blessing and a curse. Probably, Barry would say, that it's more of a blessing. And, he was a prince of a guy, and I'm sure he's developed a ton of patience through the years, because everywhere he goes, particularly I'm sure when he was younger, everywhere he goes, he's being approached by somebody, whether he's in a restaurant, whether he's in a mall, wherever he goes, every day of his life, somebody wants to come up to him and talk to him because they feel like they grew up with him. It's a responsibility in a sense,
for sure, especially with that show. There's an incredible sense of ownership over it. But the last thing I wanted to ask you before we let you go and wrap up here is do you ever, there are points at which, and you'll curse a little bit, and that's fine. It's certainly nothing that's offensive to us, where you have to like dial it back. Like where do you sort of draw the line between like, okay, this is funny, but no, I'm not doing that.
It's kind of that little voice that you have in your head when you write the caption and you read it back. It either seems right, or it seems a little harsh, or it seems a little crass or a little crude. And sometimes you can get around that by just rewriting it a little bit, softening it up with a little different verbiage. Sometimes you just kind of crumple that one up and rewrite something differently. But for the amount of profanity that I use, and I'll tell you right now, I've gone back and looked, because people email me and say, could you not curse so much? Sometimes very sincerely and nicely, and then other times, people can be kind of rude about it. But I've gone back and looked. I probably curse in about 30% of the tweets. So I think the reputation is maybe a little bit exaggerated. But, I think naturally or whatever, there's something that comes through in my voice that I think people understand, at least most people, the people who get the feed anyway, understand kind of on an intuitive level that there's a good heart behind what I'm doing.
Well, I was going to say,
some profanity lands harder just because of sort of the context of it, or the lack of humor, or whatever. And I keep my tongue planted so firmly in my cheek that I think my audience has learned that, most of those motherfuckers and, all of that stuff are said with a wink and a nod and, with the knowledge that, I'm not intending to, hurt anybody's feelings most of the time.
And I would say sometimes cursing is funny. Like that's just, I mean, sometimes things are funnier when you curse. They just are. And that's just how it is.
You do it, I think, really well in terms of intentionality. Like I've never seen you drop a motherfucker where I couldn't tell why you were doing it. Like where I look at it and go, okay, that makes sense. Like that actually was, whether you think it was necessary or not, it was appropriate. And as long as it's appropriate, then at that point, it's a judgment call on your part, Ricky, in terms of when you end up tweeting it. But also, too, like you talked about, you take the piss out of certain things, in terms of, like you said, that irreverence or the tongue in cheek, but you don't punch down. And like, I can't recall you ever doing anything that felt mean spirited. And I think that's really why you can put out some stuff that might seem a little bit edgy at times, but we followed you for a long time. I believe you that you get these emails every now and then because it's impossible not to piss off this many people following you. Again, verified Twitter, get on this. But like, I don't see a lot of people complaining about you online. Like I don't see that type of reaction. I know Brian and I have pissed off way more people than you have.
Yeah. Well, it's because we say things about Kobe sometimes, and that's
speaking for me, it's been hugely positive. I mean, people say things. I mean, once you're out there, I mean, people can say all kinds of terrible, nasty things. And if I wanted to focus on that, I could give you some examples of, just horrible things that people have said to me. But again, for every time that happens, there's literally 100 good interactions, at least probably. And I will say, two things. I appreciate you, saying that I don't punch down. I try not to. Punching down's not funny. To me, it's mean spirited, and I don't want to be that guy. Even as time has gone on, I try to be a little more judicious in my verbiage, even when somebody says stick to sports. And I know that a lot of my followers like it when I, kind of zing somebody who's being rude to me, but it's always a counterpunch. Mm-hmm. And I try to be as fair as I can about it, because I do realize that, if you're somebody that is an anonymous person and someone with the following that I have, throws the wolves on you.
Yeah.
That's unfair too. But the cursing, I never curse for the sake of cursing, believe it or not. I think you believe it, but I don't know that everyone.
No, if you pay attention, if you actually get, I mean, Brian and I are both writers, and we both, also in addition to like journalism stuff, we've done, comedic writing and things like that. So, I mean, we both pay attention to this sort of thing, especially like we both consider in a lot of ways Twitter like a writing exercise. Like it actually, you can treat it that way. And I think in some ways gain clarity and a certain degree of skill as a writer, because trying to get exactly what you want in 280 characters or less sometimes isn't easy. But there's definite intentionality in a good way with the way you go about doing stuff. So, I mean, it's there if people want to look for it.
Yeah, I would like to believe that. I use the words that I feel I need to use to create the feeling or to create the joke that I'm trying to make to accompany that picture. And if that requires, in my opinion, a little bit of profanity, I'm going to use it like salt and pepper, to serve it up. And if I don't think it needs it, I won't. I'm never going to go out of my way to throw an F-bomb into a tweet, just because I think people expect me to curse or something like that, And sometimes I can tell what kind of a mood I'm in too. I'll look at my tweets and they'll be like 8 in a row where I didn't curse at all. And then there are other days that I'll look at my timeline and, there's like 7 tweets in a row where I drop an F-bomb. So you might be able to gain some insight into what my mood is that day, based on my language too, I guess.
It is a ton of fun. It's Super 70 Sports is the follow, and you can go visit the Super 70 Sports store and get some just cool, fun, kitschy, nostalgic shit there. And it's a great
literally
place.
A section called Cool Shit, and it's $5 off everything with the code USA5. There is no limit, so do a little bit of online shopping. Like Brian was saying, it's good stuff.
And so Ricky Cobb, who started this thing up, thanks so much for coming on, man. We appreciate it. Tomorrow night, we'll get back and do some NBA, Claire de Lune. We're going to take Monday off because it's a holiday. And hey, who doesn't want a 3-day weekend? And we'll be back Tuesday with Jason Jones from The Athletic. Some great guests lined up for next week as well. And again, thanks to Ricky Cobb. Check out Super 70 Sports, and we'll see everybody tomorrow.
Donk you.